morning and welcome to Frank's School. This is the 6-year, 156 day, the first video. Degrowth USA. Well, I puzzled a little bit over what should I call this particular video because it seems like a hodgepodge in a way. Well, I'm going to relate it to this effort that a few of us are making to try to create a conference. Degrowth USA, that's maybe the name of the conference. We don't even really have a name for it. My suggestion was to get rid of the TH because that's rather hard for a lot of people to say who don't speak English. And if we get rid of the A, then we've got Degrow Us or Degrow US. I thought it might be a little bit more catchy. I don't know. I think maybe sometimes people call it a hook. But there's been development. We've had a second conference call and we email each other, and it appears that the center of this conference will be in Chicago. It appears that the date will be the last weekend in September. That's what it appears to be. It also appears that it will be in very many ways decentralized. As a matter of fact, there's something somewhat similar that's going to happen in November that will be purposefully very decentralized. So, I can't say that we had the original idea. Now, another way I might call this video, name it, is News from the Cutting Edge, because if you follow these videos, you know that for a lot of videos, which are able to be seen in the playlist Hydra in my head, or Hydra, I eventually was looking for the cutting edge of certain thinking that I've had all my life, virtually all my adult life, and where is it now? So I found it. I'm quite convinced I have found the cutting edge, and so I'm giving you news from that cutting edge. And in a sense, I'm traveling with Hydra and me. Hydra is the name I use for this vast collection, tangle I call it, of names, proper nouns, whatever, that I search for. Well, I've got more. Now and then Hydra says hi because more have come up. Well, a lot have come up. And I think to make this easier, I certainly should be doing this. An example of that is Kirsten Dirksen. She is a YouTuber. She calls herself a YouTuber. She lives, I think she's originally from California. She lives in Barcelona. She's married, and she has put many videos on YouTube, much like I do. But her videos are more professionally made, and they're largely outside. And the subjects of her videos absolutely pertain to what I'm thinking. I'm not going to say every single one, but many. Deserted villages that are reviving, for example, in Spain. Kirsten Dirksen, it would be worth searching for her on Facebook or YouTube channel. Fair Companies is the name of the company. You see, it's on there for free. This is more professionally done. She's much younger than I am. Interestingly, she also was educated at Harvard. All right. Anyway, I want to mention her. We'll see. I've tried to contact her, but I haven't heard anything from her since. All right, Brook Farm. I didn't bring that book down. This is a book that I pulled off my shelf that I don't believe I'd ever actually read the whole book. And I know I have it ever since I was in college back in the 1960s. Brook Farm. And I don't know if I bought it for a course or if I bought it for my own interest. I don't know. But Brook Farm is the name of an experiment that some of the New England transcendentalists did about 1840 to 1845, right back in there. And I knew about it. I mean, I've known about it for a very long time. Such authors as Nathaniel Hawthorne was involved, Emerson, Thoreau. They're sometimes called the New England Brahmins, I think, or the New England Transcendentalists. Anyway, I got it out and I read it, and it was much better than I expected. I thought, well, I'll just take a look at this. It was written about 1900, where the experiment also had already failed, and it was 60 years old, or 50 years old. But it's interesting. And as I say, way more interesting than I had thought. That, what I've learned to call utopian socialist thinking was livelier back at that time than I think I had imagined. And there's connections with German thinking and all kinds of connections I don't really quite understand. But anyway, a bunch of intellectuals, you might call them. I don't know if that's fair, but they collectively lived on a farm and worked that farm. Interesting. But as a result of that, I was reminded of a man named Robert Owen. Now, I had read about him in this book called, which I think it was required reading, Worldly Philosophers, before I became a freshman at Harvard. I think it was summer reading. I had to read it. But I've read it about 3 times since. And there's one chapter here called the beautiful world of the beautiful world of the utopian socialists, and in there it talks about Robert Owen. But most people don't really know anything about him anymore. Still fascinating, and applies to me because he was strong in the development of this idea of cooperativism, creating cooperatives. Well, that's what my first wife and I did in Brazil. We created a cooperative. That would be from 1968 to 1972, right in those years, to 71, and it's still there. I mean, all these years later, it still exists. It's a cooperative. It worked. But anyway. So I was reminded of him. I've got him mixed up sometimes with George Henry. George is his last name, who was around that time too. And another thing, Charles Fourier. Charles Fourier, he helped in a way to destroy Brook Farm because of his ideas, which didn't fit the farm so well. But anyway, I'm reminded of these guys. And I don't think I adequately mentioned them before. And I also really don't think Donna Brown, in her book, at least she didn't do enough to get my attention about those guys, if she mentioned them. But anyway, I've also gone back to her book, Back to the Land, and this will be about the 3rd time I've read the beginning of it, because I decided I want to look again at what she had to say about the very beginnings in America of this Back to the Land movement. These years right here, 1890 to 1920, I mean, what do most people know about those years? End of the Victorian era, the World War I, the, what do you call them? Those guys that got fabulously rich, monopolists, or whatever. But there was also such an interest in this Back to the Land movement, the arts and crafts movement. This is stuff that happened. It was important history, but it's been sort of forgotten. It was not of use, I think, to, I don't know, people who made money in the media to talk about it. Maybe in the universities they cover that history. I don't know. But Gustav Stickley, for example, I just recently found out about him, and he was a pretty influential thinker. I'm going to look into him more. And when I looked up there, he's part of the arts and crafts movement. And there was a Gustav Stickley chair in a picture on Wikipedia. And I thought, that chair, my grandpa had a chair just like that. He had 2 chairs in his living room. And I remember that one being the less comfortable of the 2. He usually sat in the other one. But anyway, it would have been new when he bought it. And, back when I talked about the sort of inheritance, the first inheritance war after he died and what happened to all this stuff, that chair went to my cousin and my mother, or my cousin's parents, and my mother and father ended up keeping the other chair. But anyway, so I think, maybe Grandpa Jim was influenced by the arts and crafts movement. He probably was. All right, I got to erase this stuff. But anyway, what's kind of got me wanting to do this right now is I contacted a man named John DeGraff. A long shot. He didn't know me from Adam, but his name came up because of this Degrowth conference. Somebody else there had said they talked to him and he does wonderful films. I thought, well, I looked him up and I thought, well, I'll try to contact him too. Well, I managed to. He got back to me. He's done about 40 documentaries. And here is a man with a mission. He's about my age, almost exactly my age. I think he's maybe 5 months younger. But he has done all these documentaries, and they all seem to be consistent in his effort to try to get people to realize there are other ways. You don't have to have lots of money to be happy. As a matter of fact, lots of money can make you miserable. You know, I think of St. Francis of Assisi. He certainly argued that. Jesus really argued that, and you know, Thoreau to some extent. Well, anyway, it's been a life mission of his to demonstrate this, and he's actually come up with the documentaries. Affluenza is the one you're most likely to know the word, the sickness that comes from being affluent. Pretty catchy term. I knew the term. I'd never seen the movie, but I will look at it now. And there's also Escape from Affluenza. See, I've got a lot of catching up to do to come on board with what this man had done. This was during the time that in my life, Hydra was in that hiatus where I had just kind of in despair given up on finding anybody that thought like I did. And for about 40 years, raised a family and taught school and did whatever. So it was occurring in that time. He also, I think maybe this is his movie. I need to look into it, but it's another one that's on there. I've got to check these out. When he was so helpful, and he continues to be so helpful. When I explained to him about, I felt there was a real need for fiction, for a narrative that would, not just documentaries or testimonials, but, and especially the arts getting involved. And he mentioned, the first one he mentioned in that connection, I think might have been Milagro Beanfield War, which I had seen. I had never heard of this. When I told him that I thought since words became an issue and a problem, I thought it would be better to just make a movie that was wordless, because then the entire world's population could understand it, because they would understand hands and eyes and bodies working and bodies doing things. And he said sort of like, let me see if I can say this in public, Koyaanisqatsi? I don't know. I'd never heard of that. But I think some of the people in this group had seen it, and in a way, I haven't looked at it all. In a way, he mentioned. I would add Aaron Brockovich. He didn't mention that movie, but I would think that might. These are not his movies, but I would think maybe that's similar here. He mentioned a novel, Ecotopia. I think it's a novel. I have to look into it. You see, this is the cutting edge. I'm not caught up with this stuff yet. But anyway, but I thought I should let Yuns know that I've found this stuff. He himself is not quite, although as he says in a sense, he confesses that yes, he thinks like a degrowther, but he doesn't like that language. He doesn't like those words. And I've got a lot of reading of his to do too as well. But and I sort of understand that. I suggested to him that what might be going on there is that two cultures that C.P. Snow talked about, the sciences and the humanities. That's helped me in a way to understand this too. I think the sciences regarding degrowth, they've laid it out as clearly as they possibly could, and they continue to do so, but they've hit a stone wall. It's inarguable, really, by logical, rational people, that growth has to stop. It even has to, can't even stay stable. It has to start going back. But the science isn't enough. That's why I say we need artists, we need musicians, we need movie makers, we need video game producers, maybe even clothing designers. Yes, clothing designers. So I mentioned that to him. Anyway, as a result of this, he gave me a link so that I was been able to look at his next movie, which has not even been released yet, Redefining Prosperity. It's about Nevada City, and I've watched it once. I'm going to watch it again, and I'm going to tell him, I'm going to sort of review it for him. I liked it. But you won't be able to find that because it's not there. But within that movie, there's a singer, Ayla Nario, I guess is the way you say her name. And I mean, she was not a major part of that film, that documentary by any means, but she was there and she was a singer. And I thought, aha, we need singer-songwriters too. This is an artist. And I've actually tried to contact her, and I imagine I will succeed, I think. You know, I've said often, I'm too old to wait because of shame or embarrassment or be timid about talking to people. So I go ahead and contact her. She even was on one point was asking for ideas about a European tour, and I thought, aha! And I gave her that the idea of going where these conferences have been: Paris, Barcelona, Leipzig, Budapest. I think maybe Vienna, maybe, I don't know, and ended up in Malmo, Sweden, September of this year. Let's see what she said. But she's a good singer, and her subject is related. That's why she was in that movie, related to degrowth and to revitalizing a small town. I don't know too much more about her than what you can find online. You could find out as much as I probably online. But you know, she at one point said she's raised on Bob Dylan, opera, and classical music. Can't go wrong with that. But anyway, I even saw in her, took me a while to realize that, but aha, there would be a well-cast person for the character of Anna in my imaginary movie. She dances, which is for that character not absolutely critical, but certainly useful. So she might be worth checking out. Well, I've been hurried. Bye for now.